Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to South Yuba River Citizens League's Youth and Outdoor Leadership Opportunity Expedition informational webinar. My name is Ray Lubitz. I'm the River Education Manager for the South Yuba River Citizens League, and I'll let my colleague Alicia introduce herself as well.
Thanks, Rachel, and excited to be here. My name is Alicia Wiseman. I'm the River Science Project Manager, working mostly on meadow restoration in the headwaters of the Yuba River.
Thanks, Alicia. For anyone out there that's watching, I first off just want to start by saying, as a member of the Yuba Watershed community, it has just been incredible to see how each and every one of you, whether you're a student, a family member, an educator, a healthcare worker, a community member, in this treasured watershed has been stepping up and being adaptive and showing up with love and flexibility during these very, very uncertain and challenging times. And I just want to acknowledge that as a community member, I've just been so impressed and so in awe of every way that all of you are showing up with love and compassion. So all that to say, as far as our YOLO, as it's also commonly referred to, expedition agenda today, the informational webinar agenda goes. We'll spend the first half hour kind of reviewing logistics and the structure of the expedition for whether you're a student that's interested in applying or a family member that's interested in potentially having your child join us, or if a community member, you're just curious. We'll spend the first half hour talking about some of those pieces and also our COVID-19 contingency plans. And then we will leave the last half hour for your questions. So if your question wasn't answered in the first half hour, we hope you'll stick around and that we can connect on the information that you want to know. So bear with me just one quick moment as I pull up our presentation, because I don't know about you, but I wouldn't want to listen to me talk for a half hour without visuals. So give me one moment here. Okay, let's see. All right, and here we go. All right, so as Alicia and I mentioned while it's loading, we work for the South Yuba River Citizens League, which is a watershed conservation organization, the Yuba Watershed Conservation Organization, I should say. And our mission is to connect the community and engage our community on ways to protect and restore the Yuba Watershed. And so within our watershed organization's mission, we have our river education department that connects students to opportunities to learn how to conserve the watershed, steward the watershed, and we work in alignment with the river science department, which is Alicia's department, to connect students to opportunities to engage in citizen science, to engage in climate action, if they're interested in a career in environmental science, to get hands-on experience with different ways in which you can do fieldwork or research in that realm. So that's kind of what our youth and outdoor leadership expedition is designed to do. It's designed to connect 6 local high school students. And when I say local, I mean within the Yuba watershed. So Nevada County students, Yuba County students, Placer County, and some kind of on the margins a bit. But we're certainly open to, if you're outside the Yuba watershed, please do apply if you're in Sacramento or the Bay Area. As we are just really excited about having students engage in this opportunity. So all that to say, the expedition brings 6 students, ideally from the watershed, out to engage in an immersive, fully funded, in partnership with the National Forest Foundation, fully funded research expedition where you get a chance to not only understand local climate change resiliency and local restoration efforts that are happening on the ground, but get a chance to be out in the incredible Sierra Nevada Meadows, get a chance to be a part of local climate action and restoration and research efforts. And also, because it is usually structured as an overnight expedition, and we'll get more into what that will look like either this year or postponed due to COVID a little bit later. But because we have these different meadows in the mostly in the North Yuba part of the watershed that we monitor, we design it as an overnight. And so you get a chance to do family meals, do hikes, do leadership development, skill building, do outdoor, you get to empower one another with outdoor skill building, do game nights, all kinds of fun stuff, and even have discussions around environmental justice and ways in which climate change is impacting us, and brainstorm solutions that are youth-led. So all that to say, we have a lot that we'll cover today, but that's just kind of the Reader's Digest version, as I should say. And so today, as you'll see here, we'll talk a little bit about, why meadow restoration? Why is it that, our student citizen scientists are supporting us in this particular area? Why it's important? Where you come in as a citizen scientist. We'll talk about our COVID-19 contingency plans, kind of overall expedition and program details, and how they'll look if they occur this year or next year. We'll get to that. And then if you're interested in applying, what our criteria is and what that timeline looks like in terms of the application and selection process. And then I'll turn it over to Alicia in a bit to discuss the specific types of data you'll be collecting, the specific types of restoration work that you'll be engaging in, a little bit of background and history on the importance of this work and where we've been up to this point, and kind of the fieldwork side of things. So yeah, all that to say, let's keep rocking and rolling here. So why does YOLO support Sierra Nevada meadow restoration and research? Why meadows in particular? How are they important to watershed health? Well, as you can kind of see, this is a very, I think, user-friendly version of how meadows are really important to the Yuba watershed. As you can see, I like to pretend that those mountains are kind of the Sierras. And when the snowpack occurs over the winter, as we all know, what happens to that snow? It melts. And typically, where does it melt? Well, it melts down into our meadows, into our creeks, into our river, and ultimately, hopefully, into our groundwater basin and our water table. And so when you look at this, we'll just pretend that this is one of our meadows that we're working in this summer. We'll pretend this is Van Norden Meadow. So as we're in Van Norden Meadow and we notice that snowpack melt occurring, if there is not a lot of native vegetation, if it's not a healthy meadow, if there's a lot of, and I'm going to scroll to the next screen, maybe come back for a bit, if there's a lot of incised channels, as you can see in this graphic here, what happens to that water? Well, there are a lot of different things. We could potentially lose that water if the hydrology of the meadow doesn't allow for the ground to essentially soak it up. We like to say that meadows are a sponge. And so if the vegetation isn't healthy enough and the meadow isn't healthy enough for the meadow to soak up that water, and it goes down an incised channel, we lose it. So we're talking about a lack of released water over time if the meadow isn't healthy. We're also talking about the potential to lead to erosion. We're talking about a lack of, if there's, again, not a healthy meadow and not a lot of vegetation, we're talking about a lack of the meadow's ability to filter that water, filter it from potentially harmful toxins and chemicals. And so, due to human impact, there's a lot of different forms of human impact that have taken place in our meadows. Our meadows are, they just need a lot of support. They need a lot of restoration in terms of the riparian vegetation. We need to better understand what a healthy meadow can do to beneficially impact the ecosystem versus what happens if we do nothing. And so one other piece that I'll share briefly, but I think Alicia will touch on a bit more later, that I think is fascinating, is that if a meadow is healthy, it will actually sequester so much carbon, in a lot of cases, even more carbon than certain acreages of forests will. One of our partners, Ben Sullivan, shared how one area of decomposed meadow that releases carbon dioxide over time, one area of decomposed meadow can actually release as much carbon dioxide as 11 acres of forest take up. So if I'll say that again in terms of 1 acre of meadow releasing as much carbon dioxide, if it is not healthy, if it is not restored, as much as 11 acres of forest consume. So if you think about the contrast of what a healthy meadow looks like, and again, Alicia will talk more about that in a bit, but if a meadow has, you know, a lot of riparian vegetation, if it is restored enough that there aren't incised channels, that the snowpack melt can kind of disperse over a wider floodplain and get soaked up by the groundwater basin and the water table. All of that to say, when the plants are healthy and they can actually store carbon, not only are we not seeing that release of carbon dioxide, but it's storing carbon for future growth, for future regeneration and health of that ecosystem. So I am new to learning all of this in the last couple of years, and it has honestly blown my mind how much coming out and supporting these efforts, this data collection, this restoration, can really inform climate change resiliency policy, and it can also really improve the health of our watershed and lead to better fire mitigation, drought mitigation, all kinds of really important pressing environmental issues that our community faces. So again, because Alicia is our resident expert on all of this, and I'm also excited to hear from her, I will kind of leave the rest of the finer details of meadow restoration and research and the rationale for your involvement as a citizen scientist, if you're a student in these efforts, for a bit later in the webinar. But getting into, and there's one of our beautiful healthy meadows, Loney Meadow, which is one that we spent quite a bit of time in. And you can see, you know, the lack of incised channels and all that really great native vegetation. But all that to say, where do you come in as a citizen scientist with doing all these efforts? Well, you get a chance to, and again, Alicia will touch on this a bit more later, but get a chance to help with water quality monitoring. You'll get a chance to conduct biological surveys. You'll get a chance to do quite a bit of just research around how carbon sequestration has been going, how native vegetation is growing, and potentially even help with some construction, some fence rebuilding, potentially some bridge building, so that people can enjoy meadows thoughtfully and safely, and learn more about all these important benefits. So all that to say, you know, we have quite a few meadow sites, and when it's just our small team of a few river scientists, we're not able to collect as much data in these vast acreages of meadow as we would if we had incredible citizen scientist support. And so the fact that we'll have, you know, you all as a team leads to more data that we can present to the community to inform policy, to inform future restoration projects, and we would never be able to have as strong of a data set if we didn't have citizen scientists like you all helping us collect that data, because a team of 10 plus is a lot stronger in terms of how much data we can collect than, say, a team of 3 or 4. So all that to say, during the day, we'll definitely be out in meadows, you know, doing these biological surveys, doing this monitoring, and talking about the importance of meadows, but we'll also get a chance in the evenings to go on sunset hikes and do game nights and have family dinners and have discussions around what you are most passionate about with climate action and environmental stewardship, what you envision for, you know, what you'd like to create as far as solutions go for our community and the global environmental justice movement. You know, there's also some opportunities to go hang by the river or potentially go see some other parts of the Sierra foothills. So it's a really, I think it's a really incredible opportunity because it's not like you're just going back and forth each day to the meadows. It really is an opportunity to make new friends, to have this really amazing summer adventure and really take a deeper dive into, you know, environmental stewardship efforts, empowering your outdoor skills, empowering your leadership skills, and just getting to be a part of this really awesome team effort. So all that to say, for those of you that are parents, students out there, educators out there wondering, oh, that all sounds great, like family dinners and staying in a cabin and hikes and, you know, your transportation's provided, like how will all of that work with COVID-19? That is a very important consideration, and we're taking it very seriously in terms of our contingency plans, you know, because of to us, it's really meaningful and important that we have an immersive structure to this expedition. And so, and all that to say, we will only carry forth this expedition in this structure if it is safe to do so. If state and federal regulations put forth that it is safe, or that if we deem it is unsafe for us to be, you know, in the same cabin, traveling in the same car, all of those components, all that to say, if it is unsafe for us to have the current timeline that we're projecting, which would be August 9th through 14th of 2020, if it is unsafe for us to have the structure as it currently stands occur during those days, we will probably postpone the expedition till June of 2021. And I say that in terms of wanting to be transparent, making sure that, you know, our students and families who are interested in this expedition can plan. And that also to say there's no deposit needed for the application. This is a completely free, completely funded, thanks in partnership to the National Forest Foundation expedition. And so we are recruiting now in the hopes that we can connect our team together virtually. You know, we're also thinking about doing a virtual orientation potentially. But we are taking, you know, this opportunity to connect with you all and see what our team can look like. And then we will carry out the expedition when it is safe to do so. So if that's August, beautiful. If it's not, we'll prioritize safety and health and well-being and do it in its immersive structure when it is safe to do so. So of course, if you have any more questions about the specifics of our COVID-19 contingency plan, please feel free to ask them. We're happy to make sure that people feel as safe and comfortable and as informed as possible when making this decision as to whether to apply or not. But in being aware of time and what we want to cover, I'm going to keep rocking and rolling here. So as far as the tentative program itinerary, you know, if it's August 9th, great. If it's day one in June, this will be kind of a similar structure, but participants would be responsible for being dropped off at our office in Nevada City, and transportation would be provided to stay overnight at our lodging in or near Truckee. Most of our meadow sites, which Alicia will touch on in a bit, are located in that general area. And so we try to find a central location to stay. And we do, again, provide lodging free of cost, typically a cabin. We're also exploring doing some camping just to see if it is possible, but more to come on that later. And then days 2 and 5, we travel each day to our meadow restoration field sites. Again, Alicia will touch on in a bit, to do some of those citizen science and team building and skills development activities until around 4 or 5 o'clock, and then we go back to the cabin for dinner and whatnot. And then on our last day, we pack up the cabin, we clean the cabin, we have a final morning of field work, and then we celebrate with, typically celebrate with an afternoon by the river to kind of relish in all our accomplishments. And then we return to the office for students to be picked up on that last day. And so this, I'm just going to briefly cover this again to ensure that we have time for everything else, but this is kind of our daily schedule. Try to let y'all sleep in a little bit given how hard we're working. But we always do a daily safety talk. We always provide lunch and plenty of snacks. We always end our field work with a closing circle. And then we try to leave plenty of time in the evenings for dinner, for, you know, something fun. Or some kind of discussion for you to rest, and then we also have a pretty strict lights out so that you can come to the field work rested and rejuvenated. As I mentioned, lodging, food, and transportation expenses are covered. That does exclude personal expenses, so if you want to buy postcards or other snacks or ice cream or things like that as we travel to and from the field sites, that you are responsible for those expenses, but everything else is completely covered. And I think that that is just an incredible gesture of generosity from our partner, the National Forest Foundation. Besides taking COVID-19 seriously as a team and as the ones that are responsible for our students' health and safety, we do take our emergency action plans and our health and safety protocol very seriously. All of our staff are CPR and first aid certified. We have an emergency action plan for things surrounding wildfires, for outdoor emergencies related to poison oak and things like that. We do a daily safety talk again, and if anything were to happen to any of our students or our team members, we always carry a satellite phone, a first aid kit, in order to ensure that we are responding as quickly and as safely as possible. And again, if you have any questions about the finer details of what that health and safety protocol looks like, please do ask in the second half of the webinar here. So I'm also aware that I want to give the floor to Alicia here pretty soon. So I'll just kind of briefly touch on, you know, if you're interested, how can you apply and how do you make sure you meet the criteria to apply? So we typically encourage Bear and Yuba Watershed High School sophomores, juniors, and graduating seniors. If you've already participated, we do try to give preference to first-time participants. And again, those within the Yuba Watershed, but if you're an alumni or if you're outside of the watershed in Sacramento or the Bay, we still encourage you to apply. There is a mandatory orientation, whether that will be virtual in July or postponed as we get closer, if the expedition's postponed to June and we want to make sure everything is fresh in everyone's minds, we may postpone it till April or May of 2021 if it's taking place in June. But there is a 2-day orientation to get you connected to your team, understand the data collection protocol. We'll train you on all of that. And then we also ask that you be flexible if you're interested in applying, you know, and to just be open to the fact that, you know, we'd love to do it in August, but again, if it's unsafe, we'll postpone. Also being comfortable with physical work, with hiking, being, you know, creative and motivated and flexible, and being excited to work in a team with peers and local scientists is definitely what we look for. And then last but not least, what does the timeline look like? Well, between now and June 11th, our applications are open. You can visit yubariver.org to download one. And on June 12th, those applications are due to me. My email is at the end. It's rlubitz@yubariver.org, and I'll repeat that in a bit. And then by June 22nd, you'll receive notification from SYRCL as to whether or not you've been selected. Again, as of right now, we have a July virtual orientation, but that may change. And again, the August 9th through 14th dates may get postponed to June. So all that to say, that's kind of the program details, expedition logistics from the just kind of overarching side of things. And I'm going to turn it over to Alicia to talk more about our restoration work and our research work.
Awesome, thanks. So yeah, we're really excited to work in Meadows. This map is great. It's the Yuba River Watershed, and it just shows some of the meadow sites that we work in and that we have worked in. And so the 3 little green dots there, that's Loney Meadow, Upper Loney, and Deer Meadow. And so if you have friends who have done our YOLO experience, they have most likely had the pleasure of going to Loney, Upper Loney, and Deer Meadow with us. This year, we're mostly going to be working in Van Norden and possibly Freeman Meadow in the North Yuba. If we do postpone until June of 2021, we're more likely to get up into Freeman Meadow and the North Yuba. But the point of all this is that these meadow ecosystems occur in the headwaters of the 3 main stems of the Yuba River. And they're very important ecosystems for wildlife and biodiversity, water quality, as Rachel mentioned, and carbon sequestration. There's just a lot of ecosystem function going on. So this picture is nice because that is an eroded channel, and you might have heard Rachel say incision or incised channel, and that's basically means a channel that has become narrow instead of broad. And so usually that's a result of erosion, and it's essentially, it's kind of like a snowball effect where the more incised, the more erosion, the faster the flows. The more erosion, it just kind of keeps happening, and then you get a much lower water table. And so our plan with restoration is always to bring that water table back up to reconnect a braided swale system in Meadows, which is essentially many small tributaries that are slow moving, that are broad and spread the water horizontally across the meadow. And so, you know, we've done monitoring in the past, and we'll talk more about that on the next slide here. Just to give some examples of past projects and past monitoring efforts. And so this map here shows Deer Meadow, Loney Meadow, and Upper Loney Meadow. And these three meadows gave us a really unique opportunity to study how the restoration efforts, which our focus meadow is Loney Meadow for restoration. We did a major restoration project there to help redivert the water to low points on the meadow, because water naturally flows at a low point. And in Loney Meadow, the water had been diverted to a high point in the meadow. And that was likely for it to be more conducive to cattle running. And so now we're trying to get it back to its more natural state, where water fills in remnant swales, essentially where it used to flow before it was altered by humans. So this was a really unique opportunity for us to focus on that restoration and monitor things like greenhouse gas flux, carbon sequestration in the form of soil carbon and root carbon, vegetation diversity, amphibian presence, what else? Oh, of course, groundwater levels and surface water flows. And it gave us the opportunity to measure those things pre and post restoration in Loney Meadow, but also measuring them in these two nearby meadows. And it was just a really fun experiment. And we had lots of YOLO expeditions come out and help us with greenhouse gas sampling, soil sampling. I think here we're collecting biomass for part of the carbon study as well. So I'll move on to the next slide. A little more about the carbon cycle, just so you can understand how meadows play such a large role in carbon sequestration. So why we were taking vegetation as part of our carbon cycle study was because carbon is stored above ground in biomass, as you can see in this figure here. So the tree is holding carbon, the animals are holding organic carbon, and the plants and trees, they're photosynthesizing, and they are pulling in CO2, carbon dioxide, and they're releasing oxygen, okay? And then you have decomposition, which is sort of the complementary counterpart, also respiration. Both processes break down organic carbon, release CO2, okay? And we have to consume oxygen to do that. And so in meadows, in a dry meadow, it's very warm, the soil is very hot, and then decomposition rates are accelerated. So that CO2 is just kind of flowing out. Also, via the process of erosion, that organic carbon is removed as well. And then when you restore a meadow and you wet it up, that wetter habitat slows decomposition. So you get the storage of organic carbon. A similar system you might have heard about is like a peat bog or a fen that accrues peat, which is essentially a carbon-rich soil. And so it's just all about storing carbon in these delta, meadow, wet environments, as much as we can do to get those systems back to their natural state and functioning the way they are supposed to function and increasing their carbon sequestration. It's a huge benefit. So that's been one of the focuses of our meadow restoration projects. Soils, a really fun activity that's part of that. So what would we do this summer and possibly in June of 2021? So we're gonna actually be getting into some restoration implementation projects. So one of those includes planting native riparian vegetation. So we're gonna be shoring up some possibly vulnerable stream channel sites at Loney Meadow by planting alder and willow cuttings. These are native riparian vegetation. We're also going to be doing our annual water quality monitoring at Loney Meadow, Van Norden Meadow. We'll be potentially doing our aspen monitoring, other biological surveys, and then another awesome activity. We're going to be installing a bridge at Loney Meadow. So prepping the site for bridge installations are really great hands-on. Just really going to be, getting our hands dirty and, really contributing to environmental stewardship. And Van Norden's a really special place. That's one of the main meadows we'll also get to work on this summer and next. And just touching back on the biodiversity of meadows and these beautiful flowers, and we have a picture of willows down in the bottom there. So you can just see the difference in riparian vegetation in that bottom photo compared to the dry sides. All right, and that kind of wraps it up. I'm happy to answer more questions though on our sampling techniques.
Awesome, thanks, Alicia.
No problem.
Yeah, so I want to acknowledge that I know we just covered a lot of information and bounced back and forth quite a bit between kind of expedition logistics, between COVID-19 contingency plans, and the rationale for the research, the background of the ecology and the environmental science side of things. So I will say this is being recorded. You can find it anytime on the Facebook, the South Yuba River Citizens League Facebook page. If you need to go back and rewatch or rehear any information, or you're just tuning in. So please feel free to do so. But I will just start to kind of answer some of the questions that are coming through, which is great. I'm encouraged to see that people are here and are curious. So Heidi Taylor, you asked, so might there be COVID accommodations, or will it only go forward if it can be conducted as it has been? It's a great question. And Alicia and I and our leadership team and our river science teams have been going back and forth about this quite a bit. I see the benefit, or we see the benefit, excuse me, of trying to do a potentially COVID accommodated expedition, given, that it's been a very challenging summer, and we're all craving, or spring and summer, I should say, we're all craving, an opportunity like this. And especially given that it will only be 6 students, we've tried to figure out, is this possible? Is it not? And I think really what it comes down to is the transportation. Because we have multiple field sites that we need to work in and have kind of time sensitive deadlines for different types of monitoring within each meadow. What we're concerned about is all 6 students needing to pile into one car, and subsequently we don't want to reduce barriers to access, or I'm sorry, we do want to reduce barriers to access. We don't want students whose families can't provide like separate transportation between sites, which would be quite a demand, I think, on families to be like, hey, can you meet us at Loney at 10:20, and then we'll drive over to Van Norden and you drop them off and then wait, for students and families to drive in individual separate cars, I think would be challenging. And we certainly wouldn't want to put that burden on families. And we also have explored, okay, well, what if we stayed at one site the whole time? And so all that to say, I know that this might not be the ideal answer to the question, but for now, we are waiting until the beginning of July to see if, state and federal regulations do explicitly say that it is safe to stay in a cabin, it is safe to be in the same car together. If it's not, at that point, because we really do value wanting this to be immersive, wanting it to be accessible and equitable, and not wanting to put the burden on families, and also not wanting to compromise any health and safety conditions, we will most likely postpone until June of 2021, just because it really is important to us and we really do value making it inclusive and equitable. And we wouldn't want anyone to not be able to participate because they couldn't drive separately or because they needed to provide their own food or their own tent or something like that. All that to say, I would say stay tuned until early July, and please still apply, and we'll certainly let all of our applicants know one way or the other, A, whether they've been selected, and B, kind of what the contingency plan looks like if they are selected. So yeah, I hope that answers that question. I'm also seeing another one from Marcel Horowitz, and I apologize if I mispronounce any names. How will you determine who is selected? It's a great question. And Alicia, I also meant to say, please feel free to jump in if you know, I miss anything or you want to add on to anything. Yes, so how will we determine who's selected? Well, our application is pretty simple. It's very straightforward. It's not necessary to have a high GPA. It's not necessary to have a recommendation letter, although that's certainly makes you a stronger candidate if you provide one. But it's more about, you know, why are you passionate about, you know, environmental stewardship? What do you want to learn from this experience? What do you want to get out of this experience? You know, what strengths do you bring to the table? It's much more, I think, passion-based and non-academically merit, but still merit-based. Again, we do prioritize first-time participants, or first-time applicants, I should say. We do prioritize those students who live in the Yuba Watershed. And if we get a large pool of students who meet those criteria and are really passionate and really driven and smart and ambitious, which we often do because there are just so many amazing students out there, then it will mostly come down to, you know, how thoughtfully and articulately they finish those essay components. There's those 3 essay components that I just mentioned. And we also have a scoring rubric, and so you get, you know, points, again, if you're a first-time participant, if you're in the watershed, and if you thoughtfully complete those essay components. So I hope that answers that question. And again, if you need more clarification or would like to see kind of more detail as to how we select, I'm happy to provide more information. But I think, I hope that kind of provides a comprehensive response. Let's see, right now we don't have any additional questions coming in. Maybe I'll give it a second to see if anyone else has any questions for the time being. We still have about 20 minutes, so please feel free to ask more if you're in the call and curious. I'm trying to think if there's anything else, Alicia, that we didn't cover or that we'd want to maybe elaborate further on.
I could talk maybe more specific about Van Norden a little bit.
Yeah, that'd be great. Maybe that, and yeah, the geography of our different field sites would be awesome.
Sure. So if any of you have been to Sugar Bowl or Donner Pass Road, Van Norden Meadow is an over 600-acre meadow system. And so it's a huge, huge meadow. Last year, we had to do some stream channel surveys with our youth outdoor leadership groups. So we'll be repeating those again this year. And if you're looking to learn about plants or wildlife or ecology, then you've come to the right place, because that's what we're really excited about. And this picture at the end of our slideshow is just a really authentic glimpse at 2 girls in science just kind of geeking out, right? Just getting excited and checking out what they found and finding it in a book. And that's what we're there to do. So we're there to get work done, but we're also there to facilitate your learning and your experience. And you know, we're just proud to be mentors in this role and to help keep students in STEM, you know, science and math tracked. And even if that's not what you want to do, even if you want to be a poet and write about the outdoors, or even if you just need some space to kind of reflect on what it is that you're kind of seeking in your journey, I think this is a good opportunity to do that.
Man, so well said, Alicia. So glad that you touched on all of those pieces. And just to echo what Alicia was saying, um, there is definitely an opportunity if you're interested in a career in environmental science. This is just the perfect way to career shadow real scientists. Alicia is a botanist and has a lot of experience in carbon sequestration. We have hydrologists on our team. And so, if you're interested in those fields, this is a great way to see, like, hey, do I like field work? Do I like doing this kind of data collection? Do I want to get paid to do this kind of work? And if it's not, that is a million percent okay. What we want is to connect students to all the incredible natural beauty and all of the magic behind what these ecosystems do for us, as they provide us clean water, and as they provide filtered water, and I did just say that, as they provide all these incredible natural resources for us, and also to just enjoy being outdoors, to really, especially during these times, I think, to enjoy the healing power of these beautiful places, and just have, a great summer adventure, and also engage in local climate action. I don't know about you all, but sometimes I feel a little overwhelmed by the issue that is climate change. And I'm always trying to reflect on what is it that I can do? What is it that I can take action on? And this is a really tangible way to support climate change resiliency efforts. The fact that you help us collect data that then goes to the state to push for more legislation that protects these places, that allocates funding and resources to protecting these places. You're a link in that chain, absolutely, to really ensuring that our community is stewarding these places and ensuring that we do have climate change resiliency models in place. So, whether you're interested in the environmental sciences career field, whether you're interested in environmental justice, or you just want to learn more about these ecosystems and have a great time with a group of like-minded peers and scientists, then, I would say this is for you. So Alicia, I'm not seeing too many more questions coming in at the moment. And I think it's also okay to end a bit early if, we're not having any more questions come in. And of course, if you tune in at, like, let's say 2:50 and you're like, shoot, I missed it. I had, this, and this I wanted to ask, please feel free to email me at that email there, rlubitz@yubariver.org. And if it's something on the restoration or field science side of things, we can certainly copy Alicia in, and I'm sure she's happy to provide more clarity on, what happens with this data once we collect it. What does a restored meadow look like, and how do I stay tuned to, how the meadow is doing that I worked on, and those types of things. I'm sure she's happy to provide clarity on. But yeah, anything else, Alicia, before we call it here? I think, yeah, the only, one other thing I will say is, I briefly touched on that we do leadership skills development or outdoor skills development in between the restoration and the data collection. And so, if you're finding that, the research is interesting, but maybe you kind of need to take a mental break from it, or you're really curious about how do I to go on backpacking trips. I've never done that kind of thing before. I really want to learn how to have the supplies for that, what that takes. That's what I love about this expedition, is we do a little bit of everything. We'll, in between research efforts, talk about, what are the top 5 things you need backpacking, or what do you need to keep in mind when you're getting on the trail? And really, we want our community to feel empowered to go connect with these beautiful places and feel prepared and informed and safe on how to do that. And so if you've been curious about how to do that, but haven't quite known how, or you're like, man, I really want to, but I don't have a budget for that, we'll talk about how to do it on a shoestring budget. We'll talk about how to develop your skills as a naturalist. And that's one of my favorite things, because my background, I'll be honest, I'm not an environmental scientist in the same way that Alicia is, but I love learning about the biodiversity of the vegetation. I love learning about the macro level of, ecosystem interdependence. I love learning about all of the different ways in which the meadows are integral to the health of the watershed. So there's a lot of different leadership skills development pieces, outdoor skills development, discussions around environmental justice. We also talk quite a bit about the indigenous communities that call the Yuba Watershed home currently, and the fact that this is also their ancestral homelands, and talk about their traditional ecological knowledge and kind of the intersection of social justice with our environmental movement. So there's a lot of aspects to the expedition, I think, on a personal development level, on a professional development level, on just a lot of different things that you're curious about learning that we get into. And so I just think it's a very multidimensional opportunity. And if you're interested in any one of those things, you may discover like, oh, I didn't think I was interested in a career in environmental science, and man, after this, I really am. So I just invite those who are interested in applying to, kind of consider some of those pieces, because we do get to do a lot of really cool things. But yeah, I know I went on a bit of a sidebar there, Alicia, but anything else we want to cover before we hop off here?
No, I'm just glad you covered the ancestry and the cultural heritage.
Thanks. Yeah. It's really important. I think, where the land is a container, right? It's a container for us as people and for our cultures, and for how we want to move forward and what we all envision as a healthy watershed. All right. Well, in that case, since it looks like we're pretty much able to wrap up. Again, visit yubariver.org for all this information, or for an application. It's you'll see as you go to the website, there's a little YOLO slider, and that's the page where you can find an application. You can also check out the River Science Team website to learn a bit more about everything Alicia spoke to. And you can also email me at rlubitz, Lubitz, at yubariver.org if you have any more questions. And again, this video will live on the South Yuba River Citizens League's Facebook page. So, if you tuned in late or are finding this later, please know there's lots of information in there as well. So yeah, I think with that, we'll sign off and say thanks so much for joining. And Alicia, anything else you want to say before signing off?
Just thank you, and we look forward to doing this expedition again soon.
Yeah, and look forward to seeing some applications, I hope. So, all right. Feel free to email in the meantime. Otherwise, take care and stay safe out there. Thanks, everyone. Okay, I think, oh no.